Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faizan Kalam, project lead at IEEE SIESGST, and ultimately we commence the last session of Epsilon 2022, the Internet Spectrum. But before we begin, I would like to wish you all a very happy 76th Independence Day. While we enjoy our lives, it is a must to be grateful for our independence and the ones who fought to provide us with it. I hope all the sessions we have had so far have provided you with a great deal of information. Now, I hope the final panel discussion, Valiant Vulnerability, does the same. Before we begin, I would like to inform you all that at the end of this session, we have a special task awaiting for you all. Worth 50 points, this is the last chance to snatch some points, so I would personally suggest don't miss out on it. So, it's time to introduce our panelists and the moderator. We have four panelists for the day and one moderator. Starting off with Mr. Nilab Samantray. He is an IIM Bangalore alumni and has a degree in computer science and engineering. He has 20 years of leadership experience in analytics, data science, and other emerging technologies. He currently works with CSM Technologies as vice president. Prior to this, he has worked with IBM Global Services, Mahindra Satyam, and different leadership roles at HP Technologies across multiple geographies. Then
Good afternoon,
we
everyone.
have
Thanks, Faizan.
we have Miss Richa, an international technical speaker, author, mentor, and engineer by heart. As a software lead at Cisco, she works in development of products that pioneer breakthroughs, and she contributes to building the Internet of Future. She is recognized as IoT thought leader and talks about disruptive technologies at global Internet of Things community conferences. She has been a speaker at IEEE Smart Cities Week, IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conferences, and the Global Women Conference. Ms. Richa has authored technical articles at Global Enterprise Viewpoint Publications and IEEE newsletter for the Spatial Smart Cities edition. Then
Thank you.
we have Mr. Harshit Agrawal, currently working as an RF security researcher, graduate student at Boston University. He is the chair of media and technology at IEEE's Computer Society, Cybersecurity STC. Previously, he was president of CSI chapter and vice president for the entrepreneurship cell at MIT, where he worked as the team of security enthusiasts. He's a student, developer, programmer, and a researcher. He believes in providing something out of the box always. Then we have Mr. Mike Nelson. He is VP of IoT Security at DigiCert, a leader in digital security. In his role, Mike oversees computer strategic IoT marketing development for critical infrastructure industries. Mr. Mike frequently consults with organizations, contributes to media reports, and speaks to industry conferences about the risks of connected devices, what can be done to improvise the security of these systems. Up next, we have our moderator, Mr. Himanshu Mehta, who is the head of threat intelligence team at HivePro in UAE. He has worked around 15 years of experience in this field. Perfect match as a moderator and is very passionate about cybersecurity and threat intelligence. He previously worked as a senior security researcher at Dark Matter and led a global team of security intelligence at Symantec, which gave him a good insight and increased his thirst into cybersecurity. That helped him eventually to emerge as a creative lead. So, these are all our panelists, and we are extremely thrilled to have them on board with us for this integrating session with where great minds come together to unveil knowledge through communication. Now, Mr. Himanshu Mehta, sir, I would like to hand over to you to carry out away with the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Faizan. Thanks for
Over to
a wonderful introduction for everyone. And I welcome all the panelists again for the discussions on 5G and IoT security. So it will be a round robin fashion. We'll be asking a lot of questions. Please feel free to interrupt me or add some pointers if somebody is saying something. It will really help the attendees to understand and take a lot of takeaways, right? So let us start. So what we are going to do is like how the shift to 5G is shaking up the IoT security. That will be the whole idea of this discussion. So, as everybody of us already know, the IoT market is projected to hit the 1.5 trillion market by 2025 or 2026. Doesn't that number look staggering? Yeah. So it's a huge number. So if you put it all through the perspective, it's almost like 600% growth from the year 2017 to 2025, which is a huge number, right? So when the IoT market was pegged, so it is pegged at $250 billion by 2025-26, which is a huge amount of money flowing into the IoT market. So it is expected that 25 billion devices will be part of the IoT network, and with smartphones making 24% or 6 billion of the total devices. Again, it's a huge number. So it is expected that each and every home will have at least one IoT device in future, and that can be the point of attack as well, right? So the biggest beneficiary, if you see, of the IoT revolution is the industries like industrial IoTs and all those you can see. So it can take off like you can secure the troves of data flowing through billions of IoT connections. There are IoT networks flowing all around the globe, you know. So this brings us to the focus point on the IoT security. And IoT security, IoT is possible mainly through the 5G and Wi-Fi networks and all of the connectivity. So we will be more discussing on the IoT adoption that continues to expand, and more 5G networks are deployed all around the globe. So it is very important to talk about the IoT security now, then it's never late. Okay, so we have to discuss about the possible impact of a successful cyber attack on IoT ecosystem, which can result in the failure of critical systems. Okay, so it is very very core, and it is going to be a very core feature integrated in all the industries, whether it is IT, healthcare, military, defenses, government institutes, education. You name any department, it is going to be part of that, right? So let us not waste time and jump on the discussion. So let me start with Mike. So Mike, you have worked on in this domain for very long, I know, and we all are very thrilled to have you here. So can you put some throw lights like what you want to discuss on the 5G and IoT? So that will be the driving the session, right?
What do I want to discuss? Well, I mean, we've got a great panel here, so I don't want to be the only one to direct this, but I do think there's a lot of good things to talk about. I mean, if you look at a high level at IoT security, I get asked all the time, who has responsibility to secure these many devices that are going to market? And I really see it as kind of a three-pillar approach, and I'd be curious to hear from the other panelists what they think on it. But maybe we can start there, and then we can dive and get more technical. We can talk about responsibility, things that are happening. But I feel like security with connected devices, and I say connected devices because when we're talking about IoT, the device is a critical component of it. But the device itself is connecting to so many other things, to gateways, to cloud services, to other devices. And that entire ecosystem has to be secured. It's not just that edge device. And so I talk about security of IoT and connected devices. And when I do that, I mean holistically about the entirety of that ecosystem and all of the component pieces. And I see some of the panelists nodding their heads. So I'm hoping there's agreement there. But when I get asked about responsibility, it has to be collaborative. The manufacturers can't be the only ones doing security. The operators, when they purchase a device, they have to be onboarding and doing things, implementing and using the security features that come as part of the device. And so there's really, I see responsibility. The first level, regulators can help, industry standards, things like that. Regulators, industries are the second pillar of responsibility. Oftentimes you see industries acting independently from government, doing the right things. And then the final responsibility would be with the manufacturer or with the operators or the end user of the device. And, I think across all three of those shoulders lies the responsibility for doing security and doing it the right way. If only one of them if only the manufacturer is thinking about security and the rest of the industry or the operators aren't doing it, you're going to probably have some problems. And so I always like to start by saying, look, it has to be a collaborative game. It has to be approached by the industry, regulators. In certain industries, we're seeing good things with healthcare. We're seeing good things in some of the automotive places and just general IoT and regulation in general. But I think that when we're thinking about responsibility at a high level, that's kind of where I start. I'm curious to hear other panelists' thoughts on that.
Definitely, that's a very good start, Mike. Thanks for adding your points. So, as informed by Mike, so we need to think about the regulation and manufacturers because they are the key holders for the IoT devices, right? So, we also need to work with the government in addition to that. So, let us see, 5G is getting deployed all around the globe, right? So, there are a lot of devices coming into the play. So, everything is going to be connected, whether it's your home, your car, your airport system, healthcare systems, everything is going to be connected. So let me jump to Harshit. So Harshit, according to you, what role does 5G and IoT may going to take in cyber reconnaissance? If you can throw some light on that, it will be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So, in simple words, before answering what cyber reconnaissance it means, we need to understand what IoT actually is. So, it's like a broad network of connected physical objects or devices which are communicating with each other and exchanging data without human interferences. So, the basic like the capabilities are collecting data, processing information, transferring data. But with all these, it is not only us with our computer, but there are also things that interact with the internet without our interventions, and these things are continuously communicating over the internet. So a fridge is today capable of sending the food inside, or our vehicle transmitting messages to the mechanic to inform its oil level. So what do you think, a world where every device you own is communicating with each other to do all of the tasks in our daily life? You open your eyes in the morning and a device is telling you the whole list of tasks you need to perform today. Also, you give instructions through your mobile phones and your coffee is ready while you getting ready for your office. Or you just imagine you turning on the oven from your smartphone and it prepares your breakfast, meanwhile you notify it's ready or not. So there's a whole long list of tasks that IoT is helping us every day. And we can say a world without IoT is like living in a stone age. So it may seem like a big claim for some of you, but when you see the bits of IoT reflected even in a mundane task of our daily life, we will agree to it. So when we say what exactly the IoT device are going to and 5G going to play a role in cyber reconnaissance, there's a lot of things. So I mentioned what how important IoT is for our daily life. Now, much like any disruptive or transformative technology, there can be little doubt that the IoT is altering the way the armed services conduct operation and coordinate across forces. It may be joined or with a coalition with a third party. So the modern concept of command, control, communication, and intelligence, which we also say is C3I, is driven by the information technology that is deeply embedded in this particular military environment in the IoT devices, and that demands very high efficiency in decision making and control. So one might consider C3I as the brain of modern warfare. And if we consider C3I as the brain of modern warfare, so if C3I systems are considered dead, there are so many different things we need to consider. And it's the internet of battlefield things are the ears and eyes, the military maneuvers are the hands and feet. So it is the preservedness of IoT devices that will essentially make the eyes, ear, hand, and feet inseparable from the brain. So one specific example which I would like to take for the cyber reconnaissance could be the route reconnaissance using the GPS enabled devices. That's very basic example. Every IoT devices is like having some kind of sensor. So let's say if any IoT devices is having a GPS, and there's a very simple case study of the fitness data company Strava, which was recently came into fire when it was discovered that its global heat map, which aggregated millions of geo-tracked devices, inadequately revealed the location and outline of US military bases in conflict cases. So we can imagine like how important it is. And while this incident provides a useful reminder about the importance of operational security, it also reveals much more valuable message about the future of route reconnaissance as a military operations. So we can imagine like a small IoT devices which I'm just wearing on my hand can have the potential to reveal the location of US military base. Now, moving a large military force over unfamiliar terrain presents a very formidable challenge. And as a result, reconnaissance formations have traditionally needed to recontour ahead of the main body to assess the trafficability of routes. So, like Strava, modern digital map applications on most smartphone uses a process of extracting locations from cell tower to determine the rate of movement along roadway. And this is what we use in our Google Map or anything to detect the traffic. So over time, this anonymized data provides a useful pattern that can show where if vehicle traffic is unrestricted, moderately restricted, or impassable. It can therefore be a powerful tool to argument the often dangerous task of ground route reconnaissance. So this was just a simple example how a simple IoT sensor can play such a deniable role in understanding the architecture of the C3I operation is now changing with time, and we need to think beyond. I will only add one point that in the before the 19th century, it was just the land reconnaissance. During the World War, it was land reconnaissance plus the air reconnaissance. We were doing the reconnaissance with the airplanes. But nowadays, is not that superior. As important is the cyber. So IoT is going to play a huge role, and especially with the 5G. With 5G, a lot of devices will be connected, so it's going to change the industry.
Thanks, Harshit. So let me put it in simpler words. So whenever you will see the IoT, there will be some reconnaissance that you might need to do, and there will be the attacks and threats available for as a pivot point. For example, Harshit gave the example of very nice example of traffic. For example, in future, like all the cars will be using the 5G technology, and they will be connected with each other. They will be sharing the traffic information. We are sharing now also, like in using the 4G network. So similarly, that will be happening in the 5G network, and we'll be sharing our location and everything. For example, suppose there is a uh, very important function going to happen at one important location, and people are allowed to travel only through one road. And if somebody shares the fake message that this road is congested and you should take the reroute the traffic, for example, that can be a huge disruption, and it can cause the havoc like situation for the traffic maintenance team, for example. Other point I would like to add here is like it reminds me of the Mr. Robot series. We remember like the garage being hacked, and even temperature is being raised inside the house. So it creates the disruption for a person living inside the house, like they are locked inside the house and they cannot have control over anything. So it can even can be a point of kill chain, like how the IoT attacks are going to happen in the future. Apart from that, one major concern, in my opinion, we can highlight somewhere in our discussion is regarding the children, which are very prone to these devices, because there are a lot of soft toys, IoT toys are being deployed in the market, and like, for example, a smart doll can be a point of attack, and we don't know because we cannot keep observing the children. So it can be a good point of discussion as well. So let me move to Richa ma'am. So Richa ma'am, according to you, why the proliferation of IoT relies on the future that 5G promises. So please throw some light on this. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Himanshu. So, thank you for conducting the discussion so well. Extremely overwhelmed by the panelists here. And as we have been talking about IoT, we talked about how everything needs to be connected, like what IoT is promising us. But when we talk about IoT, we just realize that we're talking about devices here. That, okay, now we are having so many devices in our homes that are all connected. But if
Yes.
a thing is connected, we also need to realize that it's generating data. It is not just we are connected and it's going in magic. It is the data is going somewhere, and if we want to take any steps for that data, so that means that it has to go over the network. And for IoT to realize its full potential, the data has to travel across proper network infrastructures, and then only it can be analyzed, and over that analysis a proper thing can be generated, a proper actionable. If we just have IoT standalone and we don't have a proper network backbone infrastructure, we would not be able to carry the data which the IoT devices are generating. So that's why if you hear about why proliferation of proliferation is like why spreading of IoT is relies on the future of 5G. Because if you would understand about the different use cases of 5G, that is, one is enhanced mobile broadband, that is like we talking to each other over like broadband devices, like we are streaming Netflix, or over augmented reality, virtual reality. Everything in the mobile broadband world is what 5G supports. Other is ultra reliable low latency communication. Like if you talked about connected cars, or if you talk about any mission critical infrastructure, that is also a use case of 5G. That is, we don't just cannot have low latency, we need to have ultra reliable low latency. Because if you do not get actionable insights within like split of a second, like split of a millisecond, it can just create havoc if you have those connected cars over the roads. And another important aspect that 5G promises is massive machine type communication. So that MM2C which we refer is that exactly is the IoT use case which 5G is already promising to us. So that is why this massive machine type communication is like having a large number of connected devices transmitting a low volume of relatively non delay sensitive data. So this is the key technology MMTC which 5G promises that can enable IoT. So that's why we cannot just talk about IoT as standalone because it generates a lot of data. This data has to go over the networks, and that networks strong network backbone is required to support IoT and to support this massive machine to machine communication. So that's the point about talking
That is
IoT and 5G interlinking.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Richa ma'am. And you also spoke about the low latency, which is a key thing to excel in the IoT field as well. And when we talk about 5G, even in India, we are talking about smart cities. So we need to understand it is very important to have the 5G network deployed everywhere, because if 5G is not available, it is very difficult to deploy so many IoT devices and have all the devices connected together. So we need to have good connectivity as well as low latency to maintain that. So thank you, Richa ma'am, for adding that point. So let me move to Nilabdhi sir. So Nilabdhi sir, can you please give us some IoT use cases from mining and agriculture sector that you have implemented in your company, maybe for the different clients? Because when we talk about IoT, it is incomplete without industrial IoT, right? So also it will be helpful if you can throw some light on 5G, how 5G will be accelerating and optimizing the adoption of industrial IoT applications.
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu. Before I move into some use cases, I think I was just listening to Richa. I think one point she spoke about was connected cars,
Yes.
mission critical, responses. So just to put this in an analogy, she spoke about milliseconds. So generally, 1,000 milliseconds makes it 1 second, and the human response time it's about 250 milliseconds. So in 4G, if there are connected cars, self-driven cars, the response time would be 200 milliseconds. While humans, they respond in 250 milliseconds, the 4G enables it to respond in 200 milliseconds. When we look at 5G, 5G will make it respond in 1 millisecond. So you can see the difference. It does it much better than humans as well. So there was a debate about how safe are self-driven cars. I think this answers it. They may not have been in the past, but with 5G, yes, the cars will be safer. The self-driven cars will be safer. At the same time, the aircrafts will be safer as well, where there is a mission critical, decision making has to be done within milliseconds. So that is where 5G plays a pretty good role. So just thought I will continue with what Richa was saying.
Sure.
Now coming back to the implementation of industrial IoT. So mining is one of the key industries where it plays a very major role, the IoTs. So the reason is there are two kind of mining that happens. One is underground and one is open cast. Underground is typically for say copper mining kind of situation, even for sometimes for coal mining, and open cast is like for the iron ore, they're open cast. So in case of underground mining, there is a lot of safety issues are there, both open cast as well as underground. But in the underground, there are things like what is the oxygen level, what is the temperature, what is the humidity, how much risk to the human life is there, and that is where the sensors are put in. What is the humidity, temperature, weather, and the alert mechanism. If somebody has to be evacuated before something happens. So things like if there is some water coming in, because the probes will send the data probes to the there are some either LoRaWAN network or the underground network that you build with IoTs, all the industrial IoT devices. It keeps sending the alerts within milliseconds, so that if there is something anticipated to happen, people can be evacuated before that happens, either flooding or collapsing or anything. So that is very important. As far as the open cast is concerned, so like we do a lot of iron ore related mining solutions. So we have solutions like pit to port kind of solution. That's what we call. Right from the blasting of say if you are excavating iron ore, so you have to blast a mountain or whichever is your designated mining area. From those machines, the beltometers, the trucks which carry it, the loaders, the dumpers, right up to the plant or the port, from pit to port, everything is monitored using devices. Vehicle tracking units are there, loaders, the weight that you take, because that has a fixed permit of how much ore you can take. And so all that calculation, validation, everything is IoT enabled. And with 5G, because in mining area, generally there are the remote areas and the latency and other things becomes an issue. 5G will definitely be a boon for the mining area for both underground and open cast. It will process a lot of device probes which are mission critical. You have to get those alerts in a pretty fast, not only for preventive disaster or preventive accidents, but at the same time as a maintenance. Currently, we have solutions that tells whether your truck or loader or dumper is going to stop working in the next 1 week time, because it will measure its oil, how much is there, how much of the engine is getting heated, and all those things. Apart from that, it can also measure the fuel management, how optimized fuel is being used, if there is leakage happening, how much electricity consumption is there. So all that happens using sensors and IoTs, all industrial IoTs. So there is already a massive transformation in the mining world, and with 5G, it's just going to get better and better. So that's a bit about the mining. On the agriculture, we do a lot of agri-tech solutions that includes IoTs, geospatial technologies, including our drones, sensors, machine learning, artificial intelligence, satellite imageries. We use all the emerging technologies to optimize the agriculture, the agri-tech solutions. And for one of the IoT examples where we had done a POC was, so when you put your probes inside the soil, it will give you the humidity of the soil, the temperature of the soil. It keeps on sending you the data of the same. So you can proactively take a lot of decisions whether you want irrigation, smart irrigation for that matter. Similarly, even for say animal husbandry, or you for the prawn farming, you fix up the IoT devices inside the ponds where the prawn farming happens. The sensors will tell you the salinity of the water, the pH level, the temperature, the color of the prawn. If it turns from yellow to white, it will, in the AI camera, it will send the message that it might have be ill, you might have to do something about it. So you either replace the water, and that is also automatic, you can do that, or you can put some medication. So all of this we have been doing, and wherever there are some limitations on the things like the speed, latency, and other things, I think 5G is going to be the game changer.
Thank you, Nilabdhi sir. That's a very good point. So important takeaway from Nilabdhi sir is like we need to focus on the sensors, and IoT sensors are just imagine like what Nilabdhi sir gave example of mining and agriculture. Suppose in mining it's like a you can think like if one sensor fails, like it can be a disaster like situation. So we need to think like whenever we are implementing IoT or anything, we also think about regulations. What regulations need to be in place whenever we think about implementing IoT. So it's not only in smart cities, also in the remote areas, which is very, very good in my opinion, and I think everybody will agree. So we are going to see the change in the whole landscape once 5G is deployed everywhere, and that's how it's going to be. So now when I'm talking about regulation, so let me move again back to the Mike Nelson. So what according to you is like going to be on regulation in the IoT security space? Mike, up to you.
Yeah, so there's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot that's happening in the IoT security regulation space. I think we're starting to see a lot of good activity from regulators at the general level. I mean, here I'm based in the United States. We have a Cybersecurity Act that has been passed, and the United States government is using its purchasing power to drive better practices with connected devices. They're saying that if your devices don't meet certain security criteria, they won't purchase it. That's a really good move, in my opinion.
Yes.
There's good activity in countries. I know a bunch of you are based in India, and there's a code of practices for security for consumer IoT devices. You guys are probably familiar with that. You see good regulation in Japan, Australia, in the UK, and other parts of Europe. And so we're starting to see those. A lot of the regulations are very similar in what they're prescribing. They're not overly prescriptive, which I think is good. Many of them are doing things like encouraging the elimination of hard-coded credentials or passwords, having high-level language around ensuring devices can be updated, that firmware is secure, that data is protected, and it doesn't get too prescriptive in telling them how to do that, just making sure that devices have those. And I think when regulators try to go a little beyond that, they get more in trouble. And so I'm encouraged by what we're seeing. I just think we need to see more, and we now need to begin seeing industries and organizations start to organize around those to make sure that those are in place. I think that there are core fundamentals to connected devices, whether it's a sensor, whether it's a large piece of capital equipment. I love what Richa said about data and the importance of data. The fastest way for the IoT to fail is for us to lose confidence in the data.
Yes, definitely.
The reason IoT is so valuable is because of the data. The devices are a component of it, but the reason they're magic is because of the data. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have 2 connected devices on me at all times. I have a sensor monitoring my blood sugar and a pump that's distributing me insulin. The minute I cannot rely on that number telling me what my blood sugar is, I'm going to stop using it. If you're an executive in a business and you have data that's monitoring air pressure in trucks or in any type of defense equipment or whatever it is, if you can't rely on that and you're getting bad data, you're going to stop using that. So the data needs to be protected. So the common vulnerabilities that I talk about, that I think when you're looking at regulation and security guidance and things like that, you need to make sure the data is protected. And you need to make sure not just that it's protected, but it can also be trusted. And so using things like digital signatures, making sure that everything is handled in a confidential way, and that it also has integrity. The second one is about authentication. IoT devices are also all about connecting. I have a device here that connects to a device in my garage, and the device in my garage connects, so they're connecting to a lot of different things. You need to make sure that when your devices are connecting, they need to be properly authenticated, that you have trust within that. Yes. And so regulations should also move to ensure that connections can be trusted and that malicious actors aren't gaining activity. And then the final one, I always think about the software, supply chain, the components of the device, the things that are going into it, can those be trusted? And knowing that you have trust on the components, and knowing that you have trust if an update's coming to a device, it's coming from the right party and that it can be trusted. And so those are the common, I think, core vulnerabilities. Now, clearly there are a lot of other things, but I think it's important when you look at regulation, you see a lot of things about that. Passwords are about authentication. Updates are about, the components of the device being trusted. Confidentiality is about encryption and making sure that the secrets are protected and things like that. And so, I'm encouraged by what we're seeing from a regulatory perspective. What we now need to see is manufacturers and operators demanding and making sure that those things are part of all devices that are going to market.
Exactly. That's very good point, Mike. So let me summarize it. So Mike spoke mainly about the data and the trust, and it's important to have the regulation for any kind of IoT devices also. And we are going to see a lot of regulations in the market. So it might be overwhelming for the manufacturers, because it's in my opinion, it's not the responsibility of only the manufacturer, it's also the responsibility of the consumer. Because what manufacturer can do is they can build the devices, they can maintain the supply chain and all those things, but also when they push the update, it is the consumer who has to ensure that it is coming from the authenticated source, and they should be using the digital signature and all those things. And also some cryptographic algorithm will be a key to these things. And we also see a lot of hard-coded credentials, as pointed by you, Mike sir. So that hard-coded credentials comes with many IoT devices, but that is the responsibility again for the manufacturer. As a consumer, what we can do is we can check some of the guidelines, security guidelines, whether it is meeting the compliance, what you are going to implement in your house or office. So you need to check the compliance of those devices. If it fits into your compliance, then only you should purchase that.
Yeah. Now I agree with that. Now, I also, though, believe, I think the five of us on this panel are a unique audience, right?
Yes.
We can look at maybe the bill of materials of a device and we can say, look, that device probably has some vulnerabilities. Now, if you ask my wife that, there's no way she's going to understand that. Most consumers don't have the ability to understand what security means for a device. And so I say this all the time, and I'll say it again, consumers need to be able to trust these devices. They have the right to assume security. Now, if you're an operator, like in a hospital, there's a difference there, because you should have operators who know how to handle security.
Yes.
We did a study recently in healthcare where we deal a lot with digital certificates at DigiCert where I work. And so I was curious to know, there were a lot of devices that go to market that have a birth certificate that's on the device. And we were interested to know how many of the operators are actually using that to authenticate the device to the network, or to authenticate it to an electronic health record or anything else.
Interesting.
1% of consumers, of hospital operators, were using that certificate. So that's an example of where a manufacturer is doing the right thing, but the owner is not utilizing that security feature. And if you don't do that, the security's out the window. You don't have the protection that was built in. That's why it has to be a collaborative approach.
Yes, definitely.
And there's a very really interesting point which Mike raised, that users are not that aware about the devices because they don't know about it. So it will be a different use cases for different persons. And there's a very famous quote, like, which I want to quote over here. if we were more if we were more concerned about the our devices as we are for our health, the scenario would be totally different. So when like hungry consumer want to know how many calories are in a bag of chips, they can check the nutrition levels on the bag. Then those same consumers want to check the security and privacy practices of new IoT devices. They are not able to find anything, like even the most basic fact. So there was one very famous case study and research which was done by Carnegie Mellon University, and I would like to quote it over here. That they have developed a prototype security of a privacy nutrition label, and they performed like a very good in the different use cases. So the team was like label to consist of a primary label which meant to be displayed on the outside of a device box, which conveys like the most important information such as like the type of the data the device collects, for what purpose, and with whom the data is going to be shared. So by scanning a QR code on the primary layer, consumers have access to a secondary layer of the label online that contains additional information such as like how long the device is going to retain the data, how often it is being shared. Combined like with both layers display 47 different type of information about the security and privacy practices. And after this research, like US government have also adopted this particular practice. So that's really good thing. So if we have something like that, that's really going to help. And one more point which I would like to add here is during the time of data privacy framework for India, which it when it the time when it was being framed, I guess it was 2018, and we had a meeting in Hyderabad. So there was a very famous discussion which was going around the software data privacy of all the devices and so many different things. So at that time, it was a point like which I raised it. Right now, if I want to install any software, there's only two things: either I accept all terms and condition, or I can't install the software. Either it's yes or no. So in computer, we have taken like 1 and 0, the binary, very seriously. That it's only two options: either accept our all terms conditions or don't use our services. So there also, from the digital security and privacy, we need a point that what are the different things which you are collecting that need to be highlighted, because no one is going to practically read the 100 page of terms and conditions. So if we highlight it, and if we have a concern that okay, these are the things which I agree, these are the things which is not important to me, and I don't give a concern for that. So in IoT, like we are collecting a lot of information and that is being shared on the cloud, because this is what IoT is. So
Yes.
we never know what are the different, even like if I take an example, many IoT devices are using so many different protocols to communicate, and users are not aware of that. They are like only using, let's say, Wi-Fi to communicate and do their daily applications. So they lift the default credentials for the Bluetooth, LoRa, or other protocols as it is. So this is something like where the privacy nutrition label or something like that will definitely help, and it will make it very easy for the consumers to understand. So this was the one point like which I wanted to add.
Thanks, Harshit. That's a very important point. So, Mike was also speaking about the crypto, privacy and trust and all those things, which is important for the IoT devices. So, will it be possible for you to give us some idea about like why it is difficult in implementing the cryptographic algorithms in many IoT devices? It's very challenging, right, for the manufacturers. So, if you can add some points over that also.
So the main objective of security, which is highlighted by various models, are known to be confidentiality, integrity, authentication, authorization, non-repudiation, availability. These are a lot of terms, and implementing different cryptographic mechanisms can help us achieve these system security characteristics. So, however, it is very challenging to implement this cryptographic algorithm for IoT devices. So, let's say confidentiality, which is the most significantly sacrificed due to constraint in size and power of IoT. And implementation of public key infrastructure can provide confidentiality and integrity. However, the encryption process with public key demand computational and memory resources that are beyond the capabilities of many IoT devices. Also, PKI requires the devices to be continuously updated as the certificate expire. So, updating IoT devices is another challenge. Now, especially in really small devices which do not have user interface, Moreover, some IoT devices are deployed remotely in inaccessible areas and cannot be updated without human interventions. So that is one challenge. Now, moving forward to authentication. So authentication and identification of user in IoT are also significantly important. So let's say if an attacker compromises authentication, they can get access to the system as a legitimate user and can launch various further attacks without even being detected. However, authentication has been another major challenge in IoT. So current authentication method include username, password, or digital certificate, shared key, or biometric credential. And it is anticipated that IoT as pervasive will remove many physical interaction interface mediums through which username or password are passed. Furthermore, verifying identity can be challenging in the mobile environment for multiple IoT devices. So, different users move their IoT devices to different architecture, infrastructure provided by different service provider. So, this issue of anonymity makes it difficult to achieve the accountability. And attaining effective access control is another challenge of the IoT device in the IoT domain. So, it is very difficult to use well-known access control models such as like role-based access control or attribute-based access control for low-power devices. And furthermore, like all of these things require the concept of authenticity and identification, which is already a challenge, as I said before. So there are a lot of challenges from the cryptographic perspective which still need to be addressed.
That's a very good point, Harshit. So also I wanted to ask you because you have worked a lot on drone technology, and Nilabdhi was speaking about the uses of drone in agriculture, and you might have done on some different perspective as well. So is there any about, if you know about some regulations also, if you can focus on some regulations and how this drone technology is pushing us forward in this domain? So that will be really helpful.
So I was listening to Prime Minister's speech today, and he also quoted it that India is having the most powerful drone policy ever made. And this is very important. And this is true because when we see like recently, drone conference was conducted in Sweden, in which all of the drone companies over the world came and discussed about the security solutions, the counter surveillance things, and how can we stop the use of drones in the warfare. So that's not going to happen, but still the use of commercial drones in warfare is like something which is changing the industry, and that we need some kind of regulations for that. So there are a lot of things from Indian perspective which is going to change, because India is not only looking for the drone for the defense sector, but for the agriculture, but for the emergency response team, because many
Correct.
times seasons there's some kind of damage, or there's some kind of like difficult situation where we need the emergency response team as well as for the medical things. So these are all the solutions which India is exploring. And recently, I guess 3 months back, India also organized one conference for the drone, where the Indian government have asked a lot of people to come and work on this particular project, because we need an infrastructure, we need an ecosystem. The startup culture need to be built for that. Like they have pulled around like 250 to 300 crore for all of the startup, and they have funded it so that the industry, there should be a self-reliant India in that particular industry. Now with the 5G, this industry is going to change. A lot of things is going to change, because 5G is a game changer for autonomous drones. So one of the thing is like when flying drones typically use less reliable point-to-point link, which could lose signal at any time during the flight. So for the DJI, is that the maximum range is 10 kilometers, which is not so reliable for the emergency response team. So when operating on a 5G network, a drone benefits from ultra high reliability and low latency connectivity. So as like mentioned by Nilabdhi sir and Richa ma'am. Now this means a drone can receive and act on command sent from ground command central very quickly, and 5G helps to reduce the time which is being spent between sending, receiving, and acting upon commands, therefore reducing this margin of error that could happen during the flight. This low latency is especially useful in navigation scenario, so where drones fly in GPS denied environment or beyond a visual line of sight. In this use case, drones can't use GPS and rely on visual inventory odometry to navigate in areas where the pilot's view is obscured. Many times, like I can take an example of mountains. So 5G will ensure that the drone's camera fits seamlessly, updates the pilot ground control system in real time, sending the pilot an accumulate view of where the drone is. And another challenge is India have like a really powerful drone policy. So every drone which is of more than 500 gram need to be registered, and India is also started working towards the ecosystem where we can register all of the drone with the drone IDs. We can locate it. We can see like the air traffic control, just like an air traffic control. India wants an involvement from a very starting phase that we have a control system for the drones, because we are just starting with this particular ecosystem. So it's easy for us to adapt all of the challenges and also look forward for the future, like what might be the challenges for India in the 2030. So that all challenges are concerned in this particular policy, which is like one of the best thing which when me and one of my company met, we were discussing about these particular policies.
That's very nice point, Harshit. So the important key takeaways like drone is not being only used in agriculture but also in the defense sectors, and we can see a lot of other uses of drones. Like people are now using it to deliver some of the stuffs at home, also for monitoring some of the activities around the ports, like cross-border monitoring, and all those activities are there. Other than that, we can see the uh, drones like in helping during the disaster like flooding like situations. Drones can fly over the area and can give the provide the update how many people are trapped and all those things. Even we have seen some of the cases where, for example, some landslide happens and we are not able to go physically over there. We can always take the update through the drones, like what's happening during landslide, where the in the location where landslide happened, and then according to that we can provide the help as per needed. So it's a very good thing, like to implement and use the drone in multiple ways. It's not only one way. So as far as we are developing the technologies, we are also coming up with a lot of many use cases, and I personally think that it is going to increase. There will be so many multiple use cases for the IoT as well. So
Great.
yeah.
What I want to, so
Yes, yes.
I love everything that you said. I mean, I think that I think drones, there's so much innovation and excitement and things there. The comments that you made before we got into drones, though, that I'd love us to spend a little time on that, because I think it's such a key component of
Yes, yes.
security for IoT and also for 5G, which is um, I can't tell you how frequently I hear organizations say, we can't do security because I've got a lightweight device and there's no security that's going to work on my device. And the truth is, that's just not accurate. Now, it might be more challenging, but it's not totally accurate. I'd be curious to hear from the other panelists. I mean, there's so many other approaches, the different types, asymmetric or symmetric key. We're even doing DigiCert. We just innovated. We've got this new lightweight certificate X509 profile called Global Platform, which was developed with Intel and some other big tech giants that we're excited about. But, I want to bust the myth of the fact that you can't do security on lightweight devices. Like we put security credentials on over 3 billion connected devices, and a lot of those are small sensors. Some of them are big pieces of capital equipment. But like we've got them on sensors and we have them on big pieces of capital equipment. Don't use that as an excuse. If you're working for an organization, I want to bust that. And I think we've got such a good panel here that I think we can help people realize that myth is no longer, that there is good technology and ways that you can do it, even when your device has very limited comp power.
So, Mike, that's a very good point, and I would add to that point, like with great power comes great responsibility. And as IoT device manufacturers, they have to take the responsibility of building the security by default. It is like it should be by default rather than creating the regulations and all those things. So it needs to be adopted by everyone. That's a very good point, Mike. And so, Richa, I'll come back to you. And So you have spoken about the low latency and all those things. Now, can we focus something on more like the bandwidth ever increasing, like demand generated by the bandwidth, which is being generated by 5G and IoT devices? And I would also like to ask you to highlight more on the networks that are needed for 5G, and is wireless technology not enough, in your opinion, to implement this?
Yeah, so thank you, Himanshu, for the question. And again, as just to put my few perspective in the talk that we were having right now
Yeah.
regarding security. So it is true that IoT devices have to be secure. We need to implement security in them. And for every part of this ecosystem to work together, even the networks are trying to put security in them. So we have this concept of network as a sensor also. So if the data comes out of the IoT devices, it goes over the network. Even the networks today, like while I'm working towards optical fiber technologies and on the different hardware, we maintain networks such as we analyze the data flowing over the network, and then we deduce that okay, something is going on wrong, which might be due to attackers or any infiltration that is happening. So encryption is a part of IoT devices as well, and for the entire ecosystem, the entire chain to the for the data going towards the data center, security is very important in the IoT devices, in the networks, and everywhere. So even today, networks are also behaving as a sensor. So that's
Yes,
just to add on the point that we were discussing. And
that's a very good point.
regarding the yeah, and regarding the to handle the ever increasing bandwidth demand that we have been talking about, that is being generated through IoT. So again, bandwidth demand has been coming up very higher because we have been seeing everything going on connected, and it is not just because of IoT technology that we are seeing the bandwidth demand. It's due to the augmented reality, the virtual reality, machine to machine communication, and everything that all the industry 4.0 that is coming up here, the different technologies that we are having, everything is contributing to increase in bandwidth demand. So now to handle this increase in bandwidth demand, what is needed is that we need to upgrade our networks. And when we talk about upgrading our networks, it's just not that it can happen overnight. We have to support the legacy network. If you think about that, okay, now 5G is coming up, 4G is coming up, 4G, we are just leaving it behind. So that is not true. The networks that are being developed, they have to handle the 4G traffic along with the 5G traffic as well. So everything has to happen in unison together. And that's why if I talk about networks, so a network is a very big part. And to go into a little bit of detail in there, it is like divided into front haul, mid haul, or the back haul transport networks. So if we talk about the 5G cell sites that we have, that okay, we want to have a lot of 5G small cells, so we want to have communication between them as well. So
Exactly,
that's
exactly.
where optical fibers come into the picture again. And then we have the front haul traffic, that if you would, that is commonly together called as the cross haul, that is front haul, mid haul, and back haul transport networks that interconnect the cell sites to each other, and then to the core network, and ultimately to the data center where the access content is hosted. So if you talk about IoT, like a lot of IoT and the devices data would be coming from the video surveillance cameras and the huge number of small devices connected. And then we have those distinct data centers where that video content is hosted. And if you want to cater to the large amount of bandwidth demand that is there, so everything needs to be upgraded, and also support the legacy network, that is the entire fixed wireline traffic between the radio access network that we have towards the data centers. And that's where comes into the picture, that is the open radio network alliances. Because earlier what was happening is that everything was closed and proprietary, but with the coming, with the advent of the 5G, we are now moving towards open networks. That is called the ORAN Alliance. And with the help of all the networking companies coming together, like Cisco, Juniper, and everything which came together, they've contributed to break open the networks. So that what happens is we can choose the devices from different technology and networking companies to overhaul the entire network infrastructure. And in that overall, what we need is that if you have that front haul portion of the network, that is, we need to converge the 4G front haul and the back haul traffic alongside the 5G front haul, mid haul, and back haul traffic. And that's why we need the like that would be just going into a lot of technology details into
I know, I
networking.
know.
So I'll not
Yeah.
go into a lot of detail, but what we need is that Ethernet networking, we need flexible OTN, so that we can now support the terabits of data which is coming together. If I talk about my experience, like when I began working around a decade back, I was like, you wouldn't believe, I was working on hardware that was only supporting few Mbps of traffic, like DS1 of speed that we used to talk about. And now the demand is so high that we are working towards supporting terabits of speed. So the optical fibers today, with the help of all the physics that we are having terabits of speed possible through one wavelength that is going on. So that's the amount of, we have to
Yes.
work to enable IoT and the other applications that are coming up. So to support all these technologies, the networks have to evolve, the technologies have to evolve, as well as the fiber, the chipsets, the FPGAs, everything are evolving today. And we are working, the networking companies, and of course, as an engineer is working to support that. So that's what.
That's very good point, Richa ma'am. And it's definitely so we have to understand it's not only that you upgrade one thing and you get the updated network connectivity or updated like ma'am talk about like moving from MB to terabytes, right? It's a huge task. It's not only on dependent on your sensor or hardware device or also on the software side and network side. So you have to think about everything. And whenever we are talking about nowadays, we are talking about wireless, but as highlighted by Richa ma'am again, everything is connected through wire. Okay, so nowadays we are using optical fiber. It is because the data is transferred at the speed of the light, and that is like a boon to our industry. And I think we are going to continue to evolve in this uh, field as well. So, because connectivity and speed, these are the two important factors whenever we are going to use the devices in future. So, let me come back to Nilabdhi, sir. So, Nilabdhi, sir, would you like to highlight some of the pros and cons of 5G technology and what do you think about the acceleration of these technologies?
Yeah, Himanshu, thanks. We'll start with some pros. I think all of us are aware. High speed is one of the key pros which we talk about, which is 5G is some 20 Gbps, which is if all the conditions are fulfilled, it's almost 100 times faster than a 4G. Considering 4G is 1 Gbps, but depending on conditions, it can be 100 times faster than 4G, which means I think one of the article was there where I read that it can save up to 23 hours per day of downloading speed, depending on what kind of process that is. So high speed is one thing which all of us know, which results in low latency, because if we compare with 4G, and it's not just one process we're talking about, it's supporting all other things like artificial intelligence, IoTs, AR, VR, all of that, then low latency becomes very important. And 5G is that differentiator when we see one of the key strengths of 5Gs. Increased capacity, of course, it has 100 times more capacity than 4G. It has more bandwidth than 4G, and more bandwidth means it will help transfer our data as soon as possible. Then it also has powers the innovations using other devices, like I think there was a mention about the drones, which I think Harshit was talking about the drones, other sensors. So powering those innovations are possible with 5G. And because of this bandwidth, another pro comes is lesser tower congestion, because more bandwidth, less congestion. And we see a lot of congestion in case of 4G, which gets saturated, and eventually that is where we needed the 5G. This is typically what are the benefits of 5G. If you look at some of the cons of 5G, then I think one of the key problems which we see, which will eventually get resolved, is limited global coverage, which means the key cities or the larger metros and cities, they will have 5G, but for the remote or rural areas or remote places, it will take some years before it actually reaches there in its full potential. Then there is one of the other challenges, which there are workarounds for that. That is the broadcasting distance, because if unlike 4G, where it can travel far, but in case of 5G, you have to make those pizza boxes, as they call, rather than towers, close by. so that the buildings and trees, they don't block the frequency, which is 5G is one of the key area which needs to be worked further. I mean, even in case of cloudy and rainy weather, it can impact. Um, One other con is the upload speed. While we saw about 20 Gbps, but when we're talking about upload speed, it's around 100 Mbps. When so that's not that much at this point of time. Uh, so far, it says like there is a lot of battery drain that happens, the weekend device battery. So there has to be more investment from the battery manufacturing companies to get better battery results. I think that is one area. And one other con which I think I was thinking I will talk about, but since Mike already spoke that cybersecurity is something which is a myth, I'm sure there would be some focus is happening, and cybersecurity and effective encryption is going to happen with security patches as and when the 5G rolls out. So that I won't really elaborate much on the cybersecurity aspect. I'm sure Mike has a very good point of view. So that's a bit about what are the benefits, pros and cons of 5G.
So
Yeah, I would just add to that. Phenomenal job articulating the benefits. I mean, what 5G can potentially do for IoT is there's a lot of potential, and we're really excited and beginning to see that. From a security angle, I'm very excited about what 5G is doing to improve security shortcomings from legacy 4G and others. Even simple things like maintaining security configurations for mobility handover, right? I mean, that the authentication approach, seamless authentication, stronger encryption is required. 5G raises the bar for security from a network standpoint. And
Well said, Mike.
we're really excited that those enhancements are there. And for us as consumers, that's a great thing.
yeah.
Yes, Mike, absolutely. I think raises the bar is the perfect line you said.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for addition of points. So, in a nutshell, we know we are going to move to the 5G, but there are some challenges also in implementing 5G because if you see the 5G, like it is the evolution of also 4G LTE, what we have been using for many years. Okay, so it is like a continuous process, and even in 5G, we will see a lot of developments happening and the updates coming soon. So if we talk about 5G standalone architecture, it's a very costly architecture, and it's very complicated to implement. So in my opinion, in remote areas, it will be very difficult to implement those 5G network connectivity. So maybe we'll be using the extended architecture of 4G or LTE, whatever we have used, at least for some coming few years, until unless we have the solution of from the cost perspective. Because in India, the remote areas, if government is trying to invest a huge amount of money and it does not provide the efficiency to the consumers at the end, so they are not going to make any profit. So that's why what we have seen in the recent time is like they are just extending the architecture, making it enabling them to communicate effectively in the 5G network, but it is still going to be 4G LTE for at least some time. So Mike, coming back to you, you brought very important points like security should be the responsibility of the manufacturers, and it should be by default. So what industries, according to you, are leading the way for security and IoT? Can you highlight some points?
That's a good question. So I think it's a mixed basket. I think you see. Where should I start? So let me just give a few examples of maybe industries that we're working with. DigiCert, the company I work with, we consider ourselves a leader in digital trust, which means that we clearly sell technology, but we also work with industries to help write standards. And let me maybe just give a couple examples of where we're seeing some really good standards being developed by industries that are going to raise the bar and that are going to make the industry better. So the first one I'll start with is smart home. The smart home industry, I think, is one of the fastest growing, and for obvious reasons, right? We all like having convenience. We like data. We like control. I like to be able to spy on my wife with my phone. I'm kidding. I don't do that. But we like cameras. We like all this stuff. We like access. Smart home is one of the fastest growing markets. Google, Amazon, and Alexa several years ago realized that consumers were having frustrating onboarding experiences with their virtual assistants. Madam A, I'm not going to say her name because if I do, she'll start speaking up behind me. And other virtual assistants, when you would go to onboard, your one device would work with your assistant and the other one wouldn't. There was no common language that drove interoperability between these devices. There was also no unifying security standard. We were invited to come in and help write a new specification that creates seamless interoperability between devices, but also has a security standard. That is known as Matter. Many of you may have heard of it. It's a new standard. Every Matter device will actually get the Matter logo. So when you talk about, Harshit, you talk about labeling, security labeling, it's not going to tell you what security components it has, but it does represent trust. So when you go to buy a product, the hope is that they'll be on the shelf for the upcoming holiday season, that compliant devices will be on the shelf. And most of the big tech giants in the smart home space are on board and are doing this. They're required to implement things like certificate-based authentication, secure update, encryption and confidentiality of sensitive data. A lot of good security best practices are part of Matter. And it's raising the bar for the entire industry. As a consumer, when you go to buy a device and you see the Matter logo, you can know it will work with any other compliant Matter device and that it has security built into it. Now, most consumers won't, as I said earlier, know what that security means, but at least you know it can be trusted. At least you know that it meets a threshold of security. So that's a really good example. In the electric vehicle charging market right now, there are a lot of charging stations that have vulnerabilities. There have been a lot of publications on that. We were brought in by the Society of Automotive Engineers to help write a standard to correct some of those and to create an implementation framework for deploying charging stations and connectivity to vehicles and the payment and the energy. There are a lot of different players in that space that need to be secure and securely connect. And we've helped write a standard and an implementation framework to make that better. We're seeing a lot of good progress in the emergency services. The emergency services governing body is called NENA. They operate in the US, North America, South America, Canada, and then I know they coordinate with APAC countries as well. But emergency services globally are starting to use smart devices to identify and respond to incidents. That technology needs to be secure, and they wrote a new spec, and we came in and helped write the standard for how to securely identify, communicate, and ensure that you have trust within that. Those systems are being deployed across the globe right now. We're really excited about that. So those are some areas where we're seeing some really good activity, where industries are coming together and saying, hey, look, connected devices are popping up everywhere. We need to do something about it. They're insecure. We may have rushed to market and allowed insecure devices to go. We need to get control of it. And we're seeing that in other industries, but I think those are some that I'm really encouraged by, where we're seeing really good activity.
Yeah, that's very important point, Nelson, you have brought upon. And when we talk about trust, it should come like if it is a trusted product or not, we should talk about Matter. So I think you are already working on it, and it's a really good point to keep a note of that, because when we talk about, for example, search engine, everybody says about Google. So now I know like a lot of people are using like private search engines, but that is what is the common trend. So it should be like that. So let us move to some other areas as well, because we have covered most of it. So Harshit, let me ask you, like, because you have worked on some cyber warfare also, I know, as a part of R&D. So, what are the important topics according to you for defense to investigate in this particular field?
So there are a lot of other buzzwords like which are surrounded by this Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things. But the big focus of the army is creating another buzz term, adding the B in there. So adding the battlefield as part of this. So for me, it's always being embedded devices. We are talking about security in embedded development. The big difference of course with all these different terms is what you are using them for, and oftentimes the mission and what people are using them for don't vary that much. But in this case we are talking about very extreme environment that have very hostile and downright adversarial. Not to say that other types of areas devices are not being attacked daily, either locally or across the globe, but these devices especially will be targeted and attacked often in locations where there are like extreme vulnerable situations. People literally can walk up and do whatever they want to them. So the focus of Internet of Battlefield thing is to provide situational awareness of the battlefield by utilizing a network of interconnected sensors, actuators, and analytical devices. Sensors could detect enemy movement and then relay that information in real time to analysts, enabling them to make tactical decisions on positions, areas to avoid, or who is crossing a certain area. So this capability would potentially save resources and the soldiers' life, making IOBT an important topic for the defense to investigate. And of course, the physical environment, oftentimes you are putting stuff in the field that, and you are not even going to expecting it to get it baked, and you hope that it stays alive long enough for you to get used to it, because it's not like that you are going to use it next day. It might be possible that there's no battle going to happen, or might be it's on a very extreme situation like a very critical thing all of a sudden. So it need to be ready all the time. And the last thing is that often these devices are not of any use. So we are not measuring an electric meter. It has to be sit there, stay alive, and have a reasonable assurance that it's going to work when we need it. And that could be days, months, or in some cases, years.
So, do you have any examples of these sensors for DIY projects, for example?
Sensor technology is evolving very fast. It could be IO, IR, radar, sonar, and motion, sound detector. They all have like capabilities augmented as the technology they incorporate improves. So, for example, like IO, IR can see further under much tougher climatic and atmospheric conditions, whether it is a day or night, compared to just a few years ago. So phased arrays radars can now multitask, simultaneously collecting intelligence in the land, maritime, or air domain without losing range coverage or accuracy. So there are a lot of sensors. So let me take two examples of the vibration and sound sensor. So let's say vibration sensor that can be used to detect vibration and stress experienced by the sensor and generate an electric charge based on the stress. So this spike in the electric readings can indicate footsteps or vehicle roaming through the area. So might be friend or foe. Another use case could be like identification of friend or foe used by the military currently in conjunction with radar to discern friendly and civilian vehicles and military units. Another examples of a very basic example for the DIY project which student can implement is speak up potential languages that are considered hostile or friendly. So that algorithms can be easily built up and we can do that. Otherwise, identifying different type of weapon sound could check the weapon database to match potential guns that match a certain group of people, or might be calculating the noise in the distance or how far certain threats could be. So there are a lot of projects which could be around the IOBT. These were some of the basic examples. Many of them are like already implemented and in practice. So these are some of the projects like which a student can explore into.
So, are there any uses and benefits of battlefield situational awareness?
Okay, so the very small size and low cost of sensing and communication devices make them ideal for deploying in low power network in forwarding situation to provide war fighters with like enhanced situational awareness, which is giving them a real power to see around corners and across hostile terrain. So connected to communication capabilities built into their uniform and armor. These capabilities greatly augmented like their ability to execute their missions and effectively engage and dominate the enemy in difficult environment. So with the addition of internet capability, real-time situational information can be relayed to command and support facilities remote from the battlefield, allowing advice and additional big picture information to be sent back to the warfighters, again increasing their effectiveness. And we have seen like so many use cases even in some of the conflict. I should not speak about the use cases over here in the with the name of like what are the exact cases, but there are many things which is happening around them.
That's very nice to know. So when we talk about sensors, we know like everyone has spoke about some kind of IoT sensors, like Nilabdhi sir spoke, Mike also spoke, Richa ma'am also spoke. Now Harshit spoke about the vibrations and sound sensors. So there are so many fields to explore when it comes to sensors in IoT. So it's not just one project. There can be multiple projects that students can work on. So Richa ma'am, let me come back to you. So according to you, like what are some of the industries? Like I know some Nilabdhi sir has already given some examples, but if you can cite some other industries, whether like utilities or any other industries which are benefiting from IoT, that can help students also in understanding. So that will be really helpful.
Yeah, sure, Himanshu. Yes, actually, Nilabdhi has summarized about mining industry really well. This is very true. If we had to talk about mining, it's a very like hazardous situation to be in. The condition of the workers is very hazardous in mining environments. So how IoT helps there is it can ensure safe, healthy, and sustainable operations in the mining industry. And if we talk about the other industries which get benefited with the help of IoT, one such industry is utilities. So as Mike also mentioned about smart homes, that is the complete rage right now. Everything that we talk about is a smart home, smart infrastructure. But another thing that is there is smart utilities. So when we talk about utilities, it is like this Internet of Things with the help of industrial automation. What it helps in smart grids, like utility is basically electricity that is coming to our homes, and now that has become smart with the help of IoT. So if we talk about it with the help of IoT, we would be having increased energy efficiency in the world of utility, because with the help of sensors and IoT, it would provide enhanced control over energy consumption. So even the customers, they can monitor their usage, they can save the energy, save the environment, and in turn they can optimize their carbon footprint. So what the IoT devices helps is that any abnormality in the device as per the power consumption or fault in the machinery equipment, that can be detected, and the user can be alerted to take the necessary actions so the health of the devices remain in check. So with the help of all that monitoring that comes with the help of IoT, even the users have become smart and they can take preventive actions. So one of the use case, the benefits of IoT is preventive maintenance. So it's not that you have to be reactive now. You can just know when anything wrong is going to happen, and proper action can be taken to overcome the failures which might happen in the future. And also with the help of IoT, the human efforts have become reduced, because now there's no need to physically go and keep a check on the generation, transmission, and distribution equipment in the utility world. So what IoT provides is a smart distribution grid that has sensors to detect multiple parameters like temperature, humidity, weather, and the noise of the grid, that further helps in proper and secure maintenance. And even the sensors which are there, they can alert the operators in the event of outages, so the power can be turned off to save the damage or to prevent any electrocution that might occur. Another benefit that comes is load forecasting. So with the help of right power usage of data, it helps in forecasting the load. And if we can forecast that what would be the load generation from different geographies in our country, to address the congestion issue and let the connected generation plants to meet the requirements related to frequency and any voltages control that are needed. So these are some of the benefits that IoT provides in the world of utility, because it makes everything, the electricity generation as well as the electricity distribution, so smart that outages can be prevented. So this is one of the benefit in the utility world. And another industry, if I want to highlight, is the connected transportation world. We talked about connected vehicles like autonomous cars, but it is not about just cars that are being connected right now. It's the complete transportation infrastructure. So we have connected rails today. In Switzerland, the Glacier Express is there, which is having pioneering advancements which are being coming up in the world of connected transportation, because it has connected stations, it has connected track sites, it has connected rails, and everything from all the workers which are there, they do not have to be physically present there. With the help of sensors, maintaining taking the maintaining the data from all the devices which are deployed there, everything can be predicted and all the maintenance activities happen in the background. So if the students want to know about which are the different fields where IoT is coming up, it's not just smart homes, it's not just smart infrastructure, it is everywhere. If you hear the word smart, it is IoT. So
That's
you
a
just
very
know
good
the
point.
word smart, it is IoT there.
That's a very good point brought by Richa ma'am. And in addition to that, we should also think that since we are having so many IoT devices connected at our homes, offices, everything, we need to have disaster recovery plan. So in case something goes wrong, what will be the actions taken by the personnel in case of disaster, right? So, for example, in case of cyber attacks, like it is very common nowadays, cyber attacks do happen for the companies. What are the recovery plans that you have already implemented? So now let me jump to the last question of this session, Mike. So, what according to you are some of the common IoT security challenges that you have seen, and please share your experience with the students.
Gosh, I feel I don't want to. I'll be quick, and then I'd love to hear from the others. There was also a question by one of the attendees about medical IoT, and I
Yes.
didn't mention that, but I do see really good activity there. Regulators in the U.S., the Food and Drug Administration, in the UK, there's also good regulation going on there, and we also just see a lot of manufacturers doing the right thing, and hospitals driving change through procurement language, making sure that devices they're buying are secure. So I healthcare is a field where I've spent a lot of time, and we're encouraged by what we're seeing there. So security best practices. I have a friend who's a security researcher, and whenever he and I are out together, he has this phrase that he says to me all the time. He's like, "Look, if people if they authenticate their connections, they sign their code, and they encrypt their data, hackers move to the next device. It just makes it too hard." I love that quote, and it's simple.
Yes.
But the truth is, some of these security principles that we've been talking about, authentication, whether that's good password practice, certificate-based authentication, encryption of data, protecting it, making sure you have secure updates. Those are tried and true security principles. So you have to be doing those. They're the best practices. But at a higher level, more challenging to implement, or a challenging approach, is really building a secure by design process into your organization. That's really where it begins. You can grab a certificate and you can put it on a device and you might get security, but you need to think about the life cycle of a device. Are you developing it in a secure way? Are you testing it for security? There's so many. Are you using intended use and non-intended use? There's so many examples I could share with you, but making sure that you're building security into the way you develop, deploy, and then in the end of the life, decommission a device. It has to be part. It has to be part of the DNA and the way you build things. And that's really where we need to get as an industry, is where security is part of the innovation. Security is part of the design, and it's required. And when we as consumers onboard them, we know that they're going to be secure.
Thank you, Mike. That's really good point to add. And in addition to that, I would like to add, like nowadays, most of the companies I know, like good companies at least, they use security by default word. So as highlighted by Mike, you have to implement the security during the initial phase itself. So when we start documenting everything what you need for the product or device, we also have to think from the security perspective. And when you're designing the product, you also have to do the threat modeling of the product, because there can be multiple attack vectors and multiple endpoints which can be exposed for the cyber attacks. So summarizing over all this discussion, I would thank you all the panelists, first of all, for providing very good insight into the 5G and IoT, especially from the security perspective and some core technologies perspective. There were many key takeaways. I would also like to add some pointers which might be helpful for the students. Okay, like there are a lot of security challenges in implementing the 5G. So maybe when you will be working in a 5G domain or IoT devices, you should think about always like, for example, zero-day attacks via the supply chain, as I already highlighted by Mike in previous discussion. So you have to think like, what are the attacks that might happen in the supply chain? Everything comes bundled up. One thing belongs to some other vendor, another thing belongs to some other vendor. They integrate some third party, integrate them together, and there can be some new open vulnerabilities, right? So also with more devices connected, again, thanks to you, Mike, with more devices connected, it is also expanding the attack surface. So I read somewhere in anonymous Twitter that more connected device means more attack surface for us. So you have to be very, very careful. Okay. So whenever you are connecting any device, you have to think from the security perspective also. So there are always, some built-in vulnerabilities that come up with the devices. You cannot remediate 100% of them, but there will always be some built-in vulnerabilities. Either it will be in the source code, or it will be in when connecting to some other network devices. It can be anything, right? So we have to do our due diligence, and we have to do the testing of those kind of vulnerabilities before implementing in the, at least in the corporate environment, which is very, very important, right, to maintain the compliance. Then also there are some issues while updating or repairing the custom technologies. So you will see like some over the air update comes nowadays on the mobile, but are you sure that it is coming from the authentic source? For IoT devices also, you will have to ensure that it is coming from the authentic source.
Did we lose him?
Next to your
Yeah.
home, for example. And also like there can be some proxy through which they are sending the malicious update to your device, and once you update your device using that malicious firmware, for example, they have the whole remote access. Also, you should look upon the misconfiguration of the devices, because misconfiguration is still one of the most common issue that have been reported by the security researchers all around the globe. With all due respect, I would like to end the session, and would like to open the platform for any questions that attendees might have. Please, Faizan and team, help us in getting the questions if there are any questions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. Faizan and team, do you have any questions? You can highlight the questions from the
Yes, sir,
attendees.
sure. Firstly, I would like to devoutedly thank you all for such an insightful session. It was blast of knowledge. We are really grateful for we are able to listen to your discussion this way. So now, guys, we are open for Q&A. Okay. The first question we have: how do I safely connect systems, devices, and other assets?
So, who would like to answer? Let us give the floor to panelists first, else I'll go. Yeah.
I'll take a stab. I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah. Please.
Unless someone else wants to. I've got way smarter people on here than but I'll give my recommendation. So if you're using a consumer device, most likely you'll have passwords. So make sure, I would say a starting point is implement good security password practices. Leverage multi-factor authentication, so which would require you to implement or put in your password, and then also it'll send your mobile a text. But leverage that. Make sure that you are taking advantage of the protections that come. Most manufacturers are, for consumer devices where you're interacting either through a smart application, have that. The other thing as a consumer that you can do is you can look at what manufacturers are doing around updates. How regularly are they updating? Are they updating security? And you can ask those questions. A lot of them will disclose that in the labeling or in the packages, and so you can look at that. If you're on your home network, another thing, like at my home, I have different networks, right? So I have a private network for my smart devices that makes it not discoverable by other people. It's controlled by me and can't be seen by others. And so those are some simple security approaches that you can do as a consumer for devices you might be onboarding in your home.
Yeah. So I'd like to add the point to that. Yeah. So as highlighted by Mike, so first thing is like multi-factor authentication, and second thing is like private network. So it's very important to segregate the networks for your different purposes. So if you're connecting only for some specific purpose, like you might be working from home, so your corporate network should be different from the home network. So suppose if somebody attacks your home devices also, they should not be able to penetrate through another network. So it's very important to segregate the networks. Also, please have some log monitoring tools. Okay, some basic tools which are very important nowadays. Like if you are using Windows, Microsoft Defender is there by default. Otherwise, you can use some open source tools. Also implement some for network security logs and everything. You can monitor on occasion, and it can give you the idea whether somebody was able to penetrate into your network or not. And those things are very, very important, and it always goes hands in hand. So it should be like more like from your part, you have to be more educated and more hands-on if you're implementing something at your home. In office, we always have some people coming from the expertise, but at home it is very easy to get attacked. So it will be very good to implement some of the at least basic things which are required for the security. So next
Thanks
question.
a lot, sir.
Yeah, next question.
So the next question we have for, can we get back to the last question? Team? Yeah. Next question we have for Ms. Richa. How do the security risks of 5G compare to those presented by 3G and 4G?
Yeah,
So who would like to take here? Richa ma'am here.
Okay. Yeah, so the security risks of 5G as compared to those presented by 3G and 4G. So yeah, of course, they're higher. They are much higher than what we had in the 3G and 4G, because security risks, as you ask, as 5G gives more number of connected devices, and as like it is highlighted that more the number of connections, more the number of vulnerable interfaces and the surfaces that we are having. So if 5G, with the help of 5G, we have IoT which is coming into the picture, more number of connected devices, and along with IoT, we also have other technologies that are cloud computing, edge computing. So the data is not just housed over some physical data center, it's in the cloud even. And with the help of, now we have intelligent clouds, but along with the intelligent clouds that we have, just to have proper and faster communication, we have the intelligent edges as well, so that the data can be communicated much faster. And so the data today is everywhere. We have a lot of interfaces which are there. So the security risks of 5G, it is said that it is, yes, it's a boon, but of course things are happening in the background. Vulnerabilities are increasing a lot. So with the technology is growing, but in parallel to the benefits that we are taking from 5G, we should also be very careful that proper methodologies, that risks should be taken care, like what Mike suggested in the previous question, that we have to be careful that if we are using the devices, we are using those new connections in IoT, or we are using the intelligent edges and the clouds, we should take proper security practices as well, because they are indeed higher. We are hearing about cybersecurity attacks and denial of service attacks so often. So they have increased a lot. So it's up to the users, it's up to the companies that if they're giving anything to the users, they should also build in proper security practices and proper guidelines for the users. And the users should have that proper mindset that okay, it's not just that you can use the devices anytime, you have to use them securely, and if the proper updates come, you should do that, and not just then blame the companies that are giving those devices to you. So it's up to you as well, because yes, the risks are definitely higher.
That's a very good point, Richa ma'am. And so, if we talk about from the security architecture perspective, definitely 5G has better security architecture, and they have taken the care of the risks presented by 3G and 4G. But when it comes to the more number of connected devices, obviously the attack surface increases, and that's why it is more prone to the risks.
I can just recall a quote which I heard recently. With every blessing comes a curse. We do have to contain it.
Yes.
So with 5G, we are gonna get some curse too. So jumping on to the next question, we have for Mr. Harshit. What do you feel about the future of industry IoT? Will it lead too much of dependency?
So industrial Internet of Things are the extensions of the Internet of Things, and they have paved the way towards the Industrial Revolution 4.0. So IIoT also accelerates the industry automation of internal and external working process, from including the transport, manufacturing, or marketing units with a number of connected devices. And with being the extension of IoT, like for the future, it inherits the insecurities of the technologies. However, this sensor configured infrastructure of IIoT needs some extra effort to customize the existing security solutions. So in spite of the reconstructions, I think like security model, the scope of improved development is also open to undetectable attacks we never know. And I understand the cause for intrusion by classifying, or we need to compare like various attacks on each of the IIoT layers. So for the future, like we need to have a inventory how we are increasing, how we are what are the different devices which is increasing in our dependency, what are the attack surface for that, how are they connecting, what are the different protocols which they are using, often or not we are updating it or not. So just before that, there was one more question, like what happens to my IoT security when I want to scale my business. So when we are scaling, the most important thing is to know your assets, know your inventory. When we are a startup, we have a limited devices or less devices, so it's easy to manage. But when we are increasing, it's better to have an inventory management, asset management, so that you can keep track of the all the things which is happening around them. So that will be the solution for that.
Nice.
Can I make a comment on that? I feel like asking if the future of industrial IoT will lead to a dependency. I feel it's like asking 25, 30 years ago if the emergence of the internet would lead to a dependency on the internet, right? And it's like, are we dependent on the internet today? Yes, we are. But does it create a lot of advantages? Yes, it does. And I think IoT is going to be very similar in the way that it integrates into our lives in in a lot of different ways, in every setting, business, personal, transportation, everywhere we go is going to be connected, and it's going to become part of our daily lives.
That's a very great example you took over there. Like we can really relate it. In past, we couldn't even think that something would have such an effect in our lives 20, 30 years ago, and we are connected to it. So will with IoT. So next question we have by Mr. Sanika Hyoji, by Ms. Sanika Hyoji. How do we start to proactively prevent security risks from IoT 5G? So anyone will like to answer this question from the panelists or the moderator?
No problem. So, proactively preventing from any risk, whether it is 5G or 4G, it does not matter. What matters is we have to stick to the basics. As mentioned by all the panelists, we have to think about the basics like hard-coded credentials, for example. So, for example, your 5G network might be protected, but the device you are using is prone to some kind of vulnerability. So it is your responsibility also to look whether it is hard-coded credentials are there or not on the devices, whether it is using any kind of backdoor is there or not on the firmware, whether they're giving some default credential mentioning in the source code. For example, a lot of people do firmware reversing and they find the credentials to get the admin access to the console, for example. So, and basic things like how you are communicating over the network, it should be encrypted. Yeah, there should be digital signature, for example. There should be trust, as mentioned by Mike also in the earlier. So you have to think from both, like from the privacy and cybersecurity perspective, what you are going to prevent, and based on that, you can take discuss about the risk. So if you are working in an organization, your risk can be different. If you're working from home, your risk can be different. So you have to define for what purpose you are going to use the 5G. For example, if somebody is going to use just a smartwatch, the risk can be different, and if somebody is going to use a smart bike or car, the risk can be different. So you have to think what can be the attack points or attack vectors, and how you are going to prevent against those. So again, I am saying, like, I'm reiterating that you have to stick always to the basics, because if you fail to prevent against the basic attacks, that is where the most of the attacks happen. Even now, so many vulnerabilities have been reported every year. Like last year, more than 20,000 vulnerabilities were reported in softwares also, for example. But only 14 to 15% vendors were able to patch it. Like of the vulnerabilities, they were able to patch it. So you have to think, you cannot patch all the vulnerabilities, but what you can do is, like, you can always keep yourself updated and proactively monitoring what kind of attacks are happening. Like social engineering attack is still one of the most prevalent attack, though you have multiple vulnerabilities. But you might have seen the recent case. I will not take the name, but many companies, you will see that social networking is still one of the most prominent, and you have to think you should not be the victim of social engineering. At least that is the basic level of thinking, I would say.
So with that, we come to an end of Q&A session. I hope participants, all your doubts were clarified. And I am completely sure that everyone present here must be more aware of the discussed topics now by such an insightful session. Now, now we present Mr. Nilabdhi sir with a token of gratitude from our side. Sir, we are happy to have you on board with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure to have be here and with such a wonderful panel along with all of you, the organizers as well as the panel. Thank you so much, all of you.
Up next, we have Miss Richa Daga. We present you a token of gratitude from our side. We are delighted to be on a board with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here, and it was an immense pleasure to be one of the panelists. And thank you to the panelists for joining from different geographies, participate in different conferences, and it becomes difficult because everyone is joining from different time zones. So thanks a lot for joining in and making this event so successful with all the blasts of information pouring in. So thanks a lot for inviting me, and thank you to all the panelists and the students.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we have Mr. Harshit Agrawal. We present you with a small token of gratitude from our for this insightful contribution. We are happy to have you with us, sir.
Thank you so much, Faizan. And I'm really happy to be part of this panel. We have all peoples are having a different experience, different field, different perspective. I learned so many different things from the panel, from the 5G to Wave to the digital certificates, and so many different things, important points were highlighted. So it's also a learning experience for me from so many different perspectives. And I'm really happy that you guys are doing as an student these important steps. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Mr. Mike Nelson, sir. We present you with a small token of gratitude from our side.
Thank you. Well, I am honored to be on with such great distinguished colleagues of mine in the IoT space. I have enjoyed this discussion more than most. It has been incredibly robust and healthy, and I really appreciate being included. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to present Mr. Himanshu Mehta, a small token of gratitude from our side for this insightful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Faizan and team. I just wanted to thank everyone, including panelists, also the backend team, because I know without backend team hard work, it will not be possible. And the important takeaway for the whole session is that you have to go and listen to all the panelists, whatever they have highlighted the points, and think what your areas lies into. So if you are interested in some areas, you can always reach out to us also for some questions and all. So that's how it should be perceived. It's not like just you have attended 2 hours of session, you go back and sleep. No, you have to think what I have taken away from the session and to whom I should reach out, and maybe you can take some ideas from us. You can develop some projects, and we can work collaboratively together in future as well. Yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. We are glad to have you all with us. Thanks a lot once again for this knowledgeable session. Now, we have a task for you participants. You need to submit by the end of this day the details which are mentioned of this task are in the form itself. It will be pinned in the comment section, and you can access it through the live comment section. We are streaming on YouTube. Also, make sure to fill the feedback form, guys. Remember, you are awarded points for the same. Further, we would like to express our gratitude to our sponsors for their support. Beginning with technical sponsor IEEE MTT-S, we are grateful to have team as a sponsor for successful execution of this event. IMFS, our title sponsor. IMFS was founded in 1997, was the first institution in India to deliver expert coaching for examinations like GRE, GMAT, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, and PTE. They provided professional counseling as well as platform with huge and active alumni network, strong links to over 500 institutes across the globe. Next up is Aurora Coaching. Aurora Coaching is our educational partner. It is a crypto coaching service which seeks to educate and empower people and organizations about the world of cryptocurrency so that both may approach it with same confidence. Next up, we have our streaming partner, which is StreamYard. On StreamYard platform, you may broadcast over social network directly from your browser. Before choosing the premium plans to gain access to more features, it provides a free option that you may test out. With that, we conclude the Epsilon 2022 with immense delight and appreciation towards the participants. Thank you so much, and IEEE will see you all soon.